Part two, the fear of death. Jasmine and I started intertwining our weeks together, meeting again and again as our hearts learned each other's language. Love building between us like layers of Nevada desert sediment, slowly, surely, until it became the foundation of everything. As she opened up about her days in surgery, and the more I learned about her work, the more I understood the fragile illusion of control that governs most people's lives. She would tell me stories of people begging for their lives in the ER and critical care units. And listening to those accounts painfully reminded me that every single one of us will face that moment of ultimate vulnerability. No matter how badass someone appears in their daily life, whether they're mob bosses, billionaires, Sid, or heart surgeons, when death stares them down, their carefully constructed personas crumble and their raw humanity emerges. When I questioned her about how people actually handled their final moments, she said terror consumed nearly all of them, except for a small group who'd been so brutalized by life, mostly the homeless and those suffering from chronic illness and just wanting it all done with, that they'd somehow found a grim kind of readiness for the end. Regardless of someone's toughness or their firm belief that they'll die gracefully, ready, and without regrets, the truth is that predicting how anyone will face death is impossible. The human psyche operates with a built-in blind spot when it comes to our own mortality. We can intellectually understand that death is inevitable, while emotionally living as if we're immortal. This isn't stupidity or willful ignorance. It's a sophisticated defense mechanism that evolution gifted us to keep functioning despite knowing our fate. We attend memorial services and feel genuine grief, yet underneath that sorrow runs a steady current of relief. At least not me, not today. This psychological sleight of hand allows us to invest emotionally in long-term relationships and projects, to feel genuine excitement about future plans, and to experience hope and ambition. Without this protective delusion, the weight of mortality would crush our ability to live fully. Yet through her accounts of experiences in the hospital, I learned there was a rare exception to this universal terror and denial of death. Years later, I would discover that the only people who seem to maintain equanimity in those final moments are those who've achieved some level of enlightenment, who've already died to their psychological identities before their bodies give out. You need to die before you die, one master told me. Then you see the you, the big you, the real you, doesn't die. And the terror of death won't consume you when that moment comes. A more extreme account of this, as documented throughout history, is when enlightened masters achieve what is known as maha-samadhi, the conscious, deliberate departure from the physical body while in a deep state of meditation and spiritual absorption. This phenomenon represents the ultimate expression of mastery over death, where the realized being merges consciously with the absolute, transcending ordinary mortality through pure awareness. Swami Vivekananda, for example, had foretold his own death multiple times, telling his disciples he would not live to see 40, and indeed passed away at 39 in a meditative state. His guru, Sri Yukteswar Guri, also announced his approaching departure and entered maha-samadhi consciously and peacefully. One of the more famous accounts of this was that of Swami Sivananda Saraswati, who in 1963 reportedly informed his disciples that he would leave his body in 3 days, then did exactly that while in deep meditation, like a badass. Barry has witnessed several of his students ascend out of their bodies during deep meditative states. He noted that although he disagrees with the dogma of Catholicism and almost all it stands for, he believes there is truth in their teachings on Mary's assumption, which is the belief that she was taken up bodily into heaven and never actually experienced death. Perhaps these various spiritual traditions are pointing toward the same fundamental truth, that consciousness, when sufficiently refined and liberated from identification with the physical form, can transcend the ordinary limitations of death itself. And for those who remain in their bodies until natural death, achieving profound levels of enlightenment means that fear simply ceases to exist. The terror that grips most people in their final moments is completely absent. Neringa once told me, if a nuclear bomb were to go off tomorrow, God realized people wouldn't be afraid. Gareth described how his terror of death completely vanished after the LCS gave him direct experiential knowledge, taking him out of his body repeatedly to show him exactly what the dying process and afterlife would feel like. Oh, that's it? He said. It literally felt like waking up from a dream, like taking off a tight shoe. Didn't fear death ever since. It's worth noting that there's a crucial distinction between survival fear, which is the natural biological response that keeps us alive, and a manufactured fear of the mind that tortures us daily. Survival fear makes us jump out of the way of oncoming traffic or flee from actual danger. But most of our fears are mental fabrications about future scenarios that may never occur. So when enlightened people say they have no fear, they're referring to the disillusion of psychological and existential fear, the deep-rooted anxiety about death, loss, or non-existence that stems from the illusion of a separate self. After awakening, the sense of being a vulnerable, isolated ego dissolves, and with it goes the chronic fear that pervades ordinary consciousness. However, the body's natural survival mechanisms can still activate if someone points a gun in their face. The key difference is that for the awakened person, these reactions are experienced as spontaneous bodily responses, not as existential terror. The fear doesn't stick or spiral into psychological suffering because there's no longer identification with the fearful thoughts or the body as the entirety of the self. An enlightened person may still experience the body's adrenaline in a dangerous situation, but the experience is free from psychological dread or narrative about the self's annihilation. They remain present and clear without being overtaken by panic. Perfect fearlessness arises from realizing the self, the capital S self, as something beyond the body and mind. When attachment to the body is gone, external fears lose their grip. Listen, as impossible as it sounds, many, if not all, of these ego-based fears can be removed from transmissions and energy work. And many of my mentors, like Amy, are now fearless as a result of them. Last week, I hit a deer with my car and felt no fear, Amy once told me, not long after she transitioned into Brahman consciousness. The old me would have had my heart racing, panicking, and shock, but I was calm as could be. This fearlessness extends far beyond physical danger. It transforms our entire relationship with one of the most difficult fears to overcome on the path, the fear of losing control.